Lulu, thanks a lot for joining us this afternoon. Really just tell us the significance of this ruling by the Constitutional Court.
Thank you for having me. I think the ruling by the Constitutional Court is welcomed. It's important. It's timely. We are coming off the heels of Heritage Month. It's 10 years after that seminal piece of policy was released, the ministerial report on transformation and social cohesion and the elimination of discrimination at public higher education institutions in South Africa. And so it is an incredibly welcomed and timely ruling. In addition to that, the Department of Higher Education and Training has had the revised higher education language policy in draft over the last 2 years, and that is due to be gazetted soon. And so it instills confidence that those of us working in this space are working towards an increasingly just and equal society, which is one that recognizes and represents all its identities and all its cultures, including linguistic diversity.
Let's talk a little bit about this linguistic diversity, because we had that lobbyist group that was actually advocating for Afrikaans to be also part of the means of teaching in Stellenbosch University. In fact, they were feeling like Afrikaans was actually being sidelined, hence the Constitutional Court ruling. So in a country, though, Dr. Ludu, that has got 70% Nguni-speaking people, should we there not be considering the primary or multilingualism following in that direction of maybe even introducing isiZulu as a means of teaching? I mean, if we're looking at really the demographics of the South African market and the South African people.
I mean, it sounds even bizarre to ask that question, I'm sure, but you're absolutely right. That is the country we are wanting to foster, the country we're wanting to create. It doesn't make sense that 25 years into democracy, the children who are racially and linguistically privileged during apartheid continue to be linguistically and racially privileged in terms of schooling, both at a basic education level and a tertiary level as well. I think the problem with South Africans is that, or the issue with the language problem in South Africa is that we tend to see language as a problem and not a resource. The fact that we are multilingual, that we're bilingual, this is an advantage and one that we should embrace. Multilingualism has been part of the goals at a national level for the last 25 years now, and we see that the issues around implementation, the pace around transformation have been slow, but slowly and surely we're getting there, and there have been interventions in various institutions that are moving at rapid paces, whereas some institutions still need to catch up. And I think with Stellenbosch, I mean, you have to remember that the University of Pretoria also came out with policy in 2016, the very same policy that Stellenbosch came out with, to say that English is now on the same footing as Afrikaans, and that it's given the same prominence as Afrikaans. And we've heard far less kind of contentious commentary coming from UP as we have at Stellenbosch. And I think it's important for them to remember that introducing English and equalizing access in higher education institutions doesn't mean disregarding Afrikaans. Afrikaans is still one of our languages, and it's still a language that many white and brown people speak in this country.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, obviously we're trying to look at how to foster other languages and promote other languages and means of communications, particularly institutions of higher learning, so that learning can become more easier, so to say, and more acceptable for those that are actually receiving the learning mechanism. But doesn't it also speak to a greater social construct? I mean, if we have lobby groups, for example, that are saying, listen, we're feeling that this particular language of ours is sidelined, one which had benefited the minority, particularly during apartheid, doesn't it say something about the need for societal construct to actually start transforming, even in the way in which it thinks?
Absolutely, but I think the problem is there's a lot of misinformation and miseducation, because African parents, black parents, parents to black children would be the first to tell you they want their children to learn in English. Young people themselves would also tell you they want to learn in English. There's been a recent article published by colleagues in The Conversation based on the South African Attitude Social Survey, where they found that the majority of people want their children to be taught in English because they think that it affords them, global mobility and social currency. But why I call it misinformation and lack of information is that research has shown time and time again that if learning efficiency and cognitive development are the goals, then mother tongue instruction should be preferenced. And that young people would perform better if they were taught in their own languages. But I think there hasn't been a way for that information to reach parents, to reach young people. And we need to do better as researchers in terms of disseminating and sharing some of the evidence, because there's plenty of evidence out there. It hasn't been collated in ways that I think can reach people, but there's plenty of evidence to say that bilingualism, multilingualism, mother tongue education would improve the educational outcomes of our young people in this country without a doubt.
Dr. Lidi, we're going to leave it there for this afternoon, but thanks a lot for joining us and shedding some light, and maybe even in terms of exactly where language should be proceeding, especially in institutions of higher learning.